Howdy. Welcome to May's MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Interim Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your fascineting host, Ben Wiggins.
Oh, wow. Fastidious and fascinating.
I'm reading Little Women, and Amy, the youngest, says fastidious when she means fascinating. And I just thought it was so cute.
That is very cute indeed. I appreciate the compliment, and I try to be fastidious. I'm not sure how good a job I do of being fastidious.
Well, I think you're just amazing. So
that's very kind.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. There's a lot going on right now, but that's a good thing. Our business is doing very well.
Good.
Family is doing very well. And yeah, onward and upward. And it's a beautiful day in Aggie Land.
Yeah, it's good to have a lot going on. Means good things. And
how about you?
Hard to prioritize. Good. Feeling kind of the same way. I feel like right now I have a lot of little things going on. Like our book is finished, but there's like little stuff I have to do for it. Our business is doing well. We're making great sales, but there's little stuff I have to do for it. And then I mean, of course, taking on a new job, but I'm 4 months into it. Just, it feels like a lot of little things to not forget and stuff, but things are good. Things are really good.
Good.
The weather's been great. Vaccinations are happening. Things are looking up.
I got my first one on Monday.
I heard. I am fully vaccinated, so that's exciting too.
Good. Happy for that.
Yeah, me too. So good stuff. Today on the show, we have Hollie Castro. Hollie is the Senior Vice President of Talent and ESG, which stands for Environment, Social, and Governance at Yeti. In this role, she leads all things talent, sustainability, culture, facilities, safety, and employee communications for Yeti, which brings you all of your ice chests, vacuum insulated stainless steel drinkware, soft coolers, and related accessories. And cool stickers you can put on your truck. She has built numerous high-performing teams and cultures across technology, consumer goods, and the energy industries. She is particularly passionate and experienced in working with millennials and Gen Z workers. She talks a lot about that in the episode, which is really interesting. She talks a lot about ESG, and she talks a lot about working in the tech area and bringing the agile method into Yeti, all of which was super fascinating in her episode. She has served on many nonprofit boards. She's active in her community and is currently an advisory board member for the Center for Human Resources at Mays, where she speaks regularly with our students. She has her International MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management and her undergraduate degree from Marlboro College. We are so glad to have Hollie on the show and to have her as an advisory board member for the Center for Human Resources. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Let's get into it. We welcome Hollie Castro to the show. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Good to be here.
It is our pleasure to have you. I'm very jealous of your virtual background. I want to know where that is.
I think it's somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, and I would love to say I was actually there, but I'm not.
Nice. What is your favorite superpower, Hollie?
My favorite superpower. So I have a number of them, but my favorite one is my ability to see people's potential far ahead of when they can see it and kind of call it out and encourage them to step into it or lean into it.
What's the best example, or maybe the most recent example, of how that's manifested? Like, what's a thing that you've seen that you pointed it out to someone and they were like, I could never do that?
Yeah, and then
it came true.
Very timely. I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine last night, and she's contemplating a new job. And so we got on the phone, and she was walking me through all of the things, all the reasons why this job wasn't a good fit for her. And I just sort of called out all of the things that I think are her superpowers and her potential, and why I think this is a really amazing opportunity for her. And she sent me an awesome text last night, and she said, "Oh my God, I was so in my own head. I'm totally chickening out." And so, that was a really fresh and recent example, but I think she's going to go into today and accept the offer. So
fantastic. That's wonderful news. Let's get into some team building stuff. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a town of 1,000 people west of Vail in Colorado.
Very cool. I assume you did some skiing growing
I
up.
did a lot of skiing, yes.
Is snow skiing still your favorite outdoor sport, or is there something else you're more into?
No, not my favorite outdoor sport anymore because I'm married to a Brazilian and they don't do snow. But it was definitely my favorite outdoor sport as a kid and into college. I taught skiing in college to make some money.
How many in your family?
Two kids. I have one sister and then my mom and dad.
Nice. What did your parents do? How did that impact you?
My dad was an entrepreneur and he did lots of different things. And my mom was a speech pathologist and then later in life became an executive coach. The way I think they impacted me on so many levels that I'm now seeing with my own kid. But, they were just super encouraging and they were really far ahead of their time. So they, taught me to be super curious, ask why 62 times. They really made me believe I could do anything I wanted to do in life. And, it's something I hope I'm imparting on my own child.
Give us 60 seconds on your road to your current role at Yeti.
So the Yeti job kind of came out of nowhere. We moved to Austin for personal reasons. And I had spent my career at companies like GE and Cisco and BMC Software. And I was coaching and consulting. And when I got the call for the Yeti job, I actually didn't know what Yeti was or what they did. I'd spent most of my career in high tech. And I said, I will go back inside if three conditions are present. And luckily for me, those conditions were and continue to be present. So it's been a really, really great ride.
What were the three conditions?
Yeah. So the first was I wanted to work with a CEO and a leadership team that got it. And in my world, what that means is they're smart and visionary and fast and forward thinking, but they're also really, really dynamite human beings. And in my experience, a lot of those characteristics don't tend to live together. So that was the first condition. The second condition was I really wanted to go, if I was going to go back inside, I wanted to go into a company that was doing something positively disruptive in the world. And so for me, coming from tech, I was thinking AI or big data, but definitely technology. And what I found is that Yeti is doing something very positively disruptive, bringing people together outside in nature, especially in COVID. And then the third thing was I wanted to be able to innovate in my space, whatever spaces they asked me to run or oversee. I wanted to use all the lessons I had learned from the great big companies, bring those good ones to bear, but also leave behind the things that I thought, frankly, were kind of stupid, and I didn't want those to be present. So those three conditions have been present.
Good to know. How did Yeti decide to put talent and ESG together?
So ESG is a pretty new journey for us. I mean, it's a journey we've been on, but we haven't officially or formally been on it. And when we decided to really kind of kick up our focus on ESG, I went to the CEO and I said, listen, we can hire somebody to directly report to you, or we can kind of incubate this and get it going. And I have a lot of passion around this area. I would be happy to lead it until we're ready to have it stand alone. What's interesting about the way we're approaching ESG is we believe it's not a standalone department. Rather, it's a part of who we are and a part of what we do every day. And then there's a big part of ESG that has a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which of course sits in the talent space. So he said, I think it's a great idea. You're kind of Switzerland. That was literally what he said. I don't have a horse in the race, so I'm happy to shepherd this as long as he wants me to.
Okay, that's great. What is the single aspect of Yeti that surprises people the most? Maybe especially once they get a little bit closer to the company itself.
I'd say it's twofold. The first is about our demographics. So depending on where folks are in their career when they come in, a lot of times I'll get some surprise about how our company is actually made up. So 85% millennial and Gen Z. And I think a lot of folks have assumptions about where folks in the company are in their careers and what they can and can't do, what they do and do not know how to do. The second would be pace. Lifestyle brands or outdoor brands typically are associated with very laid back environment, friendly demeanor, which is very true for Yeti. It's very friendly. But people are constantly surprised at how fast and agile it, really operates like a late stage startup. So those would be the two things.
Now, are you talking about pace in terms of, there's kind of two different ways you could mean that, in terms of responding to the market or in terms of just sort of the office environment? Like there's, like how, in terms of how full people's schedules stay and like how often, like, I don't know, the speed of communication maybe. So pace could mean really either of those things.
Both. Yeah. It's how fast we move in the market, how fast we're developing the company, but also how we work internally. They're very linked.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good to know. That's interesting stuff. How are millennials and Gen Z different from working with Gen Xers? I'm kind of a borderline Gen Xer myself. So how are those groups different to work with?
There's a few things that I observe. First, the millennials and Gen Z, they're very tech savvy. They grew up mobile first. And I think a lot of your Gen Xers, depending on where they are in the continuum of Gen X, they are more or less comfortable with technology. Millennials and Gen Z in particular, they're very hungry for frequent feedback. They want frequent feedback, much more so than Gen Xers. Okay. And then Gen Z grew up with tech embedded in everything they did from baby to where they are now. So we're just seeing the first Gen Z come into the workforce, but it's really embedded in everything they do and how they think. And they are able to multitask in a way that I think is pretty mind-boggling for many Gen Xers. Like you'll see a Gen Z person doing 6 or 7 things at the exact same time, and they're actually able to focus on all of those things. Whereas in my generation, you might be doing 1 or 2 things together, but 6 or 7, probably not very well.
Right. Now, and when you talk about doing 6 or 7 things at once, you're talking about like, messing around on a mobile app. Like what are the 6 or 7 things that they would be doing all at once?
So, it's not uncommon to see them. Okay, they've got their music on in their ears. They've got their, they're playing Pokemon or doing some sort of video game at the same time that they're following TikTok, and they're working on their computer, and they're on a Zoom on their computer, and they're probably doing something else like eating or something. They're just able to do multiple things at the same time. And actually, what I think the watch out is many times they're able to be really successful at that. It's not like all the things get done poorly.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is and bound up in that is sort of this expectation of what is respectful attention to something. There's, I have a friend who often will kind of do something else while a meeting is going on, and I've had to kind of account for that in the way that I'm running meetings sometimes, because this friend will sort of appear to be a little distracted and then will all of a sudden sit up and, spend 3 minutes saying the most important thing that's been said in the meeting so far. Really, now that I think about it, I think what it comes down to is the way that the meeting gets run often ends up at the behest of the biggest player in the room. And if that person is not aware of all the various kind of attention styles, if you will, then oftentimes you can lose out on a lot of optimization with respect to how people are thinking and how they can be most productive. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I would agree. I think that's absolutely right. There's a lot of norms, especially pre-COVID. I'm super excited to see what it looks like post-COVID, because I think I hope it's going to look very different. I hope we will have learned lots and lots of lessons through COVID that will accelerate how we think about in-office work. But I can just think of so many different times in my career where, a meeting was being run, and if you had your laptop open and you were typing on your laptop, people thought you weren't paying attention. Well, maybe you were just being efficient in your note taking instead of writing it on a piece of paper and then having to put it on a Word document or whatever. I think I'm hoping there will be a greater sensitivity to this. Now, if they're having conversations and playing video games in a meeting, that's a little trickier to explain away, but
Wait, so I can't play Overwatch during the board meeting?
Right.
What makes you excited about working with these groups moving forward? And like, honestly, one of the lurking questions is, like, as we get into like the back half of Gen Z, how do you think things are going to change again?
Well, I personally like working with millennials and Gen Z because they're super high energy. They're very creative. They think very differently. They think of different things than I would think of. They're pretty courageous. They're willing. So I see a difference between millennial and Gen Z, but they're pretty courageous about having conversations that might be uncomfortable. And then it gets down to how savvy are they in having those conversations. They're curious. They want to be mentored. So those are kind of some of the things that I think are exciting. As I look at Gen Z, I think that Gen Z will be the uniter. They will be the great uniter in that they're seeing social change happen as teenagers, as really young adults. And they're seeing things very differently just in sort of mainstream. So if you think about just television, what's on television today, they're far more inclusive than any other generation has been. And so I think what's exciting to me is I think they're going to be a uniter versus a divider in terms of a generation. They're also more individually focused than millennials are. They really don't like the everybody gets a trophy thing. So this is what we're starting to see. So we'll see if it really plays out as they go all the way through their generation. But yeah, I think it's a very exciting time to work with folks that have come through their whole life with technology.
Talk a little bit more about not liking the everybody gets a trophy thing. Is that, because the rep, and this to a degree, this is what people who have been in the workforce longer, older people tend to say about younger people. And it's been true for, 30 years at least, as long as I've been paying attention to this discussion, is that the older generation generations tend to call the younger generations soft. And is that what grates on Gen Z about this, or is there something else about the everybody gets a trophy thing that they're not liking?
What I'm observing so far, first of all, they're using social in a very different way than millennials do. They're using it more for information sharing and entertainment. They're much more in tune with privacy than I would say, millennials were, especially at the beginning. And, they're in very short bits. So if you think about one of the millennials on my team the other day said to me, I don't even know how to use TikTok. Like, what's TikTok? Because that's more of a Gen Z app. And so, I think there's going to be a difference there. We're going to see that come through. I believe Gen Z will vote with their feet. They're very environmentally conscious. I think they are learning that if we don't pay attention to the environment, they will really suffer, and their kids will really suffer, though they're not necessarily thinking about kids yet. But, I think they will vote with their feet. And what I mean by that is they won't stay at a company. If they don't believe their values are aligned with the company, they will actually change. They will change very quickly.
And you talked about embracing, uncomfortable conversation earlier, and then it's often in how gracefully that is handled. Do you think that's a similar question in terms of comfort with transition and whether transitions are being handled gracefully?
Yeah, I think it's a skill. I think it's a learned skill. So one of the things I always say whenever I do these talks is how you leave a place is more important than everything you did while you were there. And especially for this generation that, they're saying that millennials will have somewhere between 17 and 25 jobs during the course of their career. I think it'll be the same for Gen Z. So how you leave each of those transitions is more important than all the work that you did when you were there, because those relationships at some point later will be important to you. Whether it's a backdoor reference or you need them to help you or whatever. You just need advice. So I think that learned skill around how gracefully you have those difficult conversations is an important one.
So you're saying it's a bad idea to flip the tables and throw stuff through the windows and Kyle take notes.
Scorch earth.
In a recent article series on LinkedIn, you talked about how Yeti has adapted as a result of the pandemic. One of the key insights you mentioned was the importance of agility to your team's success. What were the steps you took to make agility more than a buzzword?
So when I talk about agility, I'm actually talking about the methodology of agile. So coming from the software world, agile is an actual methodology you use to build great software. And you can apply that methodology to lots of other things. And so when we went into the pandemic, about a month before we did our shift to go have everybody work at home, I launched sort of an effort that you would see in a software company where you're using agile. So pulled together subject matter experts from all different disciplines, all different teams. We set up the problem. We chunked it out. We did stand up and stand downs every single day.
What are those?
So a stand up is how you kick the day off and you talk about what needs to get accomplished that day. And a stand down is, okay, how'd it go? What's missing? What barriers are present? And you do that every single day. And that's how you kind of work through an agile project. And then in terms of the subject matter experts, they come in and out of the project. There's some that will stay there the whole time, but then there's others that, you bring them in for a specific purpose and then they leave. And it was our first sort of foray to do that at Yeti, and it worked really, really well. So, we worked through issues, we tested those, we modified, we tried them again. And as a result of that, I think, our engagement with our employees through this whole last year has been extremely responsive to what they were going through, because we really use this agile mentality. And I'm constantly saying to the team, whatever we said we were going to do on the roadmap, it might get changed from Saturday to Monday. So we just need to be comfortable with that. And they've been really great about being really flexible.
One of the mindsets we are hoping to continue developing at Maze is the societal impact mindset. Where do the programs you oversee have the greatest impact on building this mindset at Yeti?
Well, the most natural one to reach for is ESG. Right. ESG, but the way we're approaching it, I think, is kind of special and unique. And part of it is who we are as a company and what we do. But it's really the way we think about ESG sustainability in general is being a part of the fabric of our company versus standalone programs that we put goals and metrics on so that we can say we did the standalone program. We're really at the beginning of our journey. So one of the things that I've been very focused on is building shared mindset and shared buy-in to what we are going to do, what impact we are going to have, and what we're going to use as guardrails to say no. Because if you're us in the outdoor space, you could say yes to a whole bunch of things. And one of the things we have, because we're so new at this, we've got to have enough discipline and rigor to say, here's the things we are going to do, and here's the things we aren't going to do, because we can't do everything. And then I think the last thing that I would say about this is we're really focused on doing and then talking versus talking and maybe getting to do or not ever getting to do. So we're starting internally. We're doing a lot of of action and really thoughtful work, and we're not saying much yet. So when we start to talk about it, especially externally, I think our shareholders, our customers, they will see, wow, they didn't just talk about it, they actually went and did a bunch of stuff. So that's sort of how we're thinking about it. And we'll see. We've got a lot of work to do.
Let's talk specifics, in as much as you can get into it. What's the hardest individual call that you've had to make with respect to ESG and or diversity and inclusion? Like, how have you had to put your money where your mouth is, or your time where your mouth is in that respect?
Yeah, so on the diversity, equity, inclusion front, I would say, the social injustice issues that have happened in the last year in the US have really brought everything to the forefront and opened the door wide open to run through. And I think my job is to make sure we're being incredibly thoughtful and sustainable about how we go do whatever we go do. So, in the June timeframe, we stood up our first DE&I council. We have 6 employee affinity groups now. And what I'm really working with the teams on is, let's be mindful that whatever we do in year 1, we can continue to do in year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, so that you don't do one thing and then have to take it away or back it up because you can't actually sustain it. There's an enormous amount of passion in our company around ESG, and finding that sweet spot and the balance of how much is too much in year 1 and how much, we still have a company to run. So being really supportive, but also just making sure that we can sustain everything that we're doing, and that, frankly, we don't put goals out there that lead to unintended consequences. We've talked about staffing and the progress that we've made over the last 3 years in terms of staffing. And one of the things I've said is we're kind of driving a speedboat here. Be really careful how quick you turn the wheel, because you could flip the speedboat if you go too fast. So just being really thoughtful about how we step through that. I think that's, and it applies to everything from DE&I to our environmental goals and setting the strategies around that. It applies to all the way across the board.
What is a current talent issue that you find leadership tends to underestimate?
So I said before, we are 80% Millennial and Gen Z, and leadership assumptions that can be made that are really detrimental to the workforce are understanding what people actually know how to do, and not going A to Z and forgetting to do B, C, D, E, F, G. Right. Taking the time, slowing down, allowing time for questions, allowing folks to ask for context. And I think this concept of context is incredibly important with Millennial and Gen Z. Why am I asking you to do this? Where does it fit in? How does it impact other people? So really, I think leadership understanding that, if you want to get the best out of this workforce, you have to take the time and you have to spend your energy to help them along. The second thing I would say is that with regard to Gen X, I think there's still a lot of Gen Xers, not all, but many Gen Xers think in terms of loyalty and time and role and how long people will spend with us. And there's a mentality shift that I think is really important, because most millennials and Gen Z are not going to spend 10 or 15 years at a single company. It may shift as they age, but in the early part of their career, they're going to change a lot. And so I'm very open and transparent with our workforce to say, hey, if we can keep you for 3 or 4 or 5 jobs, and we can make this place interesting enough for you to stay, we've done a great job. And then when you leave, somebody asked me the other day, are you a boomerang culture? And I said, absolutely, as long as you leave in a respectful way. And don't break a bunch of glass and chairs and whatever on the way out the door.
What's the most counterintuitive advice you have for a business person at any stage of life?
When you're unhappy at your job, look inside. Don't look outside. I think a lot of times when I talk to people that are unhappy with something about, how their work is going, it tends to be my manager's fault, my colleague's fault. I don't have enough resources. But the reality is what they're really unhappy about is something on the inside. And then if I click down from there, getting really clear about what they value. So, when I was in college and coming out of college, I was very, very motivated by money and what was right in front of me right then. And I didn't necessarily take the time to do the work and the self-reflection to really figure out what motivates me. And as I went along in my career, I figured out, if I can get very clear about what makes me tick and what motivates me, I will attract and align the perfect situation for myself at that point in my life. And by the way, that changes as you go through your life, or it can. So I think that the counterintuitive piece is to go slow enough so that you can go fast.
That's great. I love that. Let's move to rapid fire. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Every person has a superpower. You just have to figure out what it is.
If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
Given the parameters of this question and how I was supposed to answer, I'm going to say Oprah, because I think she's overcome a tremendous amount of adversity. She's very impactful, and I'd love to learn how she inspires and mentors women around her.
What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
I think that one of the biggest misconceptions of me is that I'm really tough and that I make decisions with fact and data. But the reality is I'm super tenderhearted. And so I grind, like when I have to make a really tough decision, I grind over it. It keeps me up at night. I don't sleep. But people don't really know that about me.
What book have you given most often as a gift?
There's two. The Secret and Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Think and Grow Rich is an interesting one. I avoided that one for a long time because, just being honest, because of the title. But then when I read it, it was like, this is kind of pretty different than what I expected. The other one that is totally that way is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I avoided that for a long time because of the title. And then I read it and I was like, oh no, this is the best version of what a book with this title would be. But I was like, yeah, I don't know. That feels a little, puppet mastery, a little Machiavellian, but it's totally the opposite.
I'm glad you didn't say The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Yeah,
True. Yeah, The Art of War by Sun Tzu is pretty much exactly as advertised.
Exactly. Sure is.
We close each session with Good Bull. Anyone you would like to send Good Bull?
So first of all, I love this practice, and this is how I do every single one of my staff meetings. We call it acknowledgments, but we send out good bull every single staff meeting. I would just acknowledge my whole team. They have worked so hard this last year, and they're making a huge impact on this company.
Superb. Good bull to them. Good bull to you. Hollie, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
I loved Hollie's episode. We hope you all enjoyed it as well. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I want to start with her superpower of seeing other people's potential before they do. I loved that. I want that superpower too. And to be able to help people, that's something I've really thought about more at this stage in my career. And we've talked about this on the show before, where you're kind of focused on yourself and advancing your career. And now it's really fun to be able to think about how I can help others advance their career. So it was really neat. I hope I can develop that superpower like Hollie has as well.
I've noticed that a lot of our superpowers have started to become about interaction with others. It really highlights kind of the human species as we're social animals, and interaction with others. Every religion talks about the importance of honoring others and to do right by them. And I'm loving that we're seeing reflections of that in the superpower choices.
Yeah, I agree. I love the superpowers when people answer like what their own superpower is. I love those answers. I found those most interesting lately on the show when people talk about what their own superpowers are. I also thought it was really interesting. I'm still on takeaway number 1, by the way, folks. But I thought it was really interesting when she talked about helping another woman realize their potential before they do. And I know she also does that with men. She's talked about that before. But I think it's so interesting with women, especially in helping them think about, in the example she talked about was helping a woman realize she was qualified for a job. And there's some really interesting data where, and we may have talked about it on the show before, but where women will apply for a job only if they have every requirement for that job. And so they look at the job description and they go down the list and like, oh, I don't have that one thing. But men will apply for a job if they have at least one thing on the list. And I think that's so interesting and something that all women need to keep in mind to, hey, apply for the job even if you don't have you don't check every single box on the requirements.
Yes. And men, be more assertive as well. Apply for the job even if you have 0 of the qualifications.
But maybe not, because then I have to screen your application and it's kind of annoying. But no, I think that's such an interesting, clearly her example that she used in that case really matched with women not realizing that they should just apply for a job anyway, even if they don't check every single requirement on the box. For our second takeaway, I wanted to talk about the generational differences. And I love generational differences conversations. I think a lot of people do. So I really enjoyed what she talked about. I actually taught a 1-hour course at Mays on generational differences in the workforce. That was really fun and interesting. It's been probably 15 years since I taught that course, but I really enjoyed it and having those conversations with our students. And so I attended a lot of presentations about generational differences. And one of the things that one of the presenters said that I thought was most useful in thinking about generational differences was that the thing that drives generational differences the most is what you talked about at the dinner table in your most formative years. So around age 11, what your family was talking about at the dinner table when you were about 11 years old. And if you think about the different generations, I think that's really telling. One of the things that she talked about with Gen Z was that they also are pushing back against the everyone gets a trophy culture, but they were hearing that conversation at the dinner table at age 11 where their parents were annoyed about the everybody gets a trophy culture. And I just think it's so interesting how that has such an influence on us.
When I played Little League, we got a trophy every season, and our team was also really, really good. We won the league a few times.
You still would have gotten a trophy even if you hadn't, though.
We definitely would have. And I don't think that adversely affected me. What I do think is important is learning how to deal with winning and losing and how to handle them both in a classy way is a vital skill. But also, it's important to just show up. I'm going to strike a blow for participation trophies and say there's something to be said for honoring people for just doing what they said they would do and showing up. And win or lose, I think there's value in that. It's when we start to say the result doesn't matter at all that we run into problems.
Yeah. And I have always viewed the everybody gets a trophy as more proverbial, that I think there is something cool about commemorating a season with a participation trophy. And we do have winners and losers. And so thinking about that too. But yeah, that's great. For our third takeaway, I want to talk about what we should take from this next generation is the tell me why you want me to do this aspect. So I think it's so important for employers to remember to tell their employees why they're asking them to do something, not just, hey, do this reconciliation of this account, but here's why we do this reconciliation of this account. Because the younger generations are so creative and they'll come back and say, oh, I was doing it this way, which is how we did it last year, but I know we're trying to accomplish this and I think this is a better way to do it. And you bring so many more opportunities to the company if you just tell them what you're trying to accomplish rather than maybe focusing so much on how to accomplish it, but why you want them to accomplish it. And then let them use their own creativity in doing that.
Yeah.
What I think we need to leave behind from these generational differences is this myth of multitasking. Like,
oh, yeah.
Literally not possible. And I tried to make myself believe that I was a good multitasker. Well, I mean, I am like a better multitasker than most, but I tried to make myself believe or let myself believe that I was a good multitasker, but it is not a thing. Like our brains cannot focus on two things at once. So no, but
No.
what I think maybe we're better, or the next generations are better at doing, is switching things more quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't think they can focus on two things at once.
Yes.
I agree with that.
Do you want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. You're going to like this one. In any field, the value of truly and fully knowing the frontier of current thinking is that the next question becomes obvious.
Nope, I hate it. I'm just kidding. I love it.
Steve Wiggins.
Oh, Steve Wiggins. I do love it.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.